Our next speaker is a software developer at Rootstrap, and his talk is titled Rock and Mock. So that's definitely an interesting title. Um, I'm going to bring Dario to the stage with me. Hello,
Hi.
Dario.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really great. How about you?
I'm doing really good.
Okay,
so,
amazing. So I'm excited to hear about your talk. Do you want to do a small preview of what you're going to talk to us about?
sure. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking about server mocks and how we can work in parallel as a team.
Okay,
Um,
count me interested. So without any further ado, I'll give you the virtual floor. And yeah, everyone, this is Dario with this presentation.
okay, awesome. So, morning. Welcome to Rock and Mock, or How to Work in Parallel as a Team. My name is Dario, and I'm a semi-senior software engineer from Bootstrap, which is a Norwegian American company. We have teams of experts from all around the world, and we are focused on outcome-driven development, which includes rescue missions, building apps from scratch, and also extra development muscle for clients' internal projects. I also used to work at Mercado Libre, and I focus on React.js and Node.js currently. So before we get started, I'd like to give you guys a Mentimeter. Um, so I'd like you guys to tell me if you ever had a frustrating experience integrating APIs. So the code, I think I can give it to you guys. The code is 366.1.94.44, right? Yeah, so if you'd like, you can vote and tell me if you ever had a frustrating experience integrating APIs. So while we're doing that, sometimes, right? So while we're doing that, we can tackle that later. We can start talking about a little bit about mocks and what they are. Um, So we're gonna be talking about what a mock is, why would we mock in the first place, how do we mock exactly, and then some pros and cons of different alternatives, some examples, and then a Q&A. Um, okay, so we're already having some votes here, and okay, that's interesting. So most people sometimes have frustrating experiences, and then a few people have every single time a frustrating experience, and then no one says never, right? So we're gonna speak a little bit about why that is, and why we keep why this comes up, right? So we're trying to build an application. Building an application requires a front end and a back end, and why why does this happen every time, right? Or most times, um, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what a mock is, right? So, uh, in a nutshell, a mock is an inexpensive fake, right? So it's like that scene from the movie Wolf of Wall Street, right? So it's a fugazi. It's something that's in the air, right? It's not real. And in the case of server mocks, we're talking about something that emulates a server, right? So instead of having a real server, which is expensive, we have to deal with authorization, the actual logic of the application, the business model, all of that sort of stuff. And that takes time and money. And sometimes we need to first, for uh, business reasons, or maybe we want to pitch the idea to an investor, and we don't necessarily want to invest all of that time in the back end, which is not going to be as viewable as the front end, right? And so, right, so most people have had some bad experiences with APIs. Okay, and now I'm gonna give you another one, which is what mock have you used in the past? It's okay if you haven't done if you haven't used any of them, so you can put none, and then we're gonna use some of the alternatives that are right here, right? Right. So I figure that most of you probably know unit test mocks, which are the most common, and that's awesome. Um, and also the all right, so we have a few with stoplight, mock service worker, and if you haven't used any of them, that's awesome, because that means that this talk is going to give the most value to you. And so, okay, great. So we have an overwhelming success on the part of unit test mocks. That's awesome. Okay, great. So let's go back to the presentation. Right, so we were talking about server mocks or mocks in general, which are inexpensive fakes, right? It's something that's not really there and that just helps us get things done, right? So why do we mock exactly, right? So the first reason is that it's fast and cheap to develop, right? So imagine in the casual case, we have a front-end application, a back-end application, and we try to join them as one. And something that happens is that it's complicated, it has nuances, it has like different options that make it like really difficult to make an integration. And sometimes, right, like I was saying previously, maybe you want to show the client front end while you still are in the middle of developing the backend. And so, yeah. So another reason is that the real API might not be accessible, right? So if you are consuming an endpoint from an API from the government or some other entity that's regulated, you might not have access or the authorization to consume the actual API. Maybe only the production code can access it. It may not be reliable. So if you're consuming an API from a third party and the API is down for some reason, that may imply that you have to halt your development process. And so like if it's down for a day, you cannot work on that project for a day. So that's the worst. And something that also may happen is that the real API might not even exist, right? So maybe we're building an app from scratch and we're developing the front end and the backend is in development, but it's not built yet. And we don't want to, as front-end developers, we don't want to pressure the backend engineers at all, right? So as you probably know, if you have like an engineer background or developer background, we learn about classes, right? And we learn that when a class is too close to another class, they are too tightly coupled together. And that's bad because they are codependent, right? And that makes it difficult for a lot of reasons, but we can extrapolate that and use it to our own development process and say, hey, if I, as a front-end developer, need the backender's work to be able to work, that's too tightly coupled, right? So we want to move away from that and be able to work on our own. So here we have like a front end on its own, and it's very sad, and we have nothing to consume. So some strategies that I've used of and heard of from other people include like having objects in the front end, which are like sort of mocks, but they are inside the actual code. So that's not very clean. And sometimes like you just consume the actual API when you have it. So it's very, very improvised. And what we see here is that with a server mock, we are actually able to unite it with the front end and just like be happy with our application. And right, so even though I'm saying front end a lot, some of the use cases that we're going to use, we can we could be talking about a backend that consumes a third-party application. So that's also the case. That also helps, right? So okay, let's say you guys are interested. How do you mock exactly? So we have numerous tools. One of them is Mockun. Another one is Mock Service Worker. And we have many others like Stoplight and yeah, so tons of them. There are like tons of competitors in the market, and that's awesome because that means that we have more to pick from. So let's talk a little bit about these two options. Mockun is one that I've been using for the past 6 months, and it's awesome. In one word, it's like the postman of mocks. So basically what it means is that if you know Postman, Postman lets us consume a backend application without having the front end. And this is sort of like the opposite. We can provide a server and consume it without having to actually make the server. So we're going to see a few examples later. And basically the thing that it has is that it has a UI. So it has an interface. It's very user-friendly. We don't have to code at all to use it. So it's very, very friendly to anyone who just wants to get started. And yeah. And here we have a screenshot of how Mokun works. So here we see that we have on the far left, we have multiple projects that we can set up with their different environments, and we can see the local host, the port, and where we want it set up. If we go a little bit to the right, we have unlimited endpoints, which is the place that we can set up folders or endpoints with gets and mutations and all that sort of things. We can set the params, right? So we can use, so the same way that in a real backend application, we could use the params and the query params and things from the body and all that sort of thing, we can actually also use in Mokun. It's very, very flexible in that style. We can use rules to determine which responses are returned. And also it's independent of your code. So as you can see, Mokun doesn't know what kind of project you have. If you have a React project, if you have an Angular project, you just use it independently. You could even be using Python and consuming another API from like a banking client, and so it's very independent. Let's do an overview of Mock Service Worker as well. Mock Service Worker is a package that we can install on JavaScript and TypeScript applications, and it basically uses code to do exactly the same. So it's we set up a server right there in our front-end application, and we can just start going with our different endpoints, and so it works basically the same way. It does the same thing. The only difference is that it doesn't have a user interface, right? So if we can, we can create handlers for the endpoints that work with JS. The only drawback that I can see here, apart from the UI, is that we have to, this is specifically for a front-end application, right? So here we can see that we have the verb. So we have rest.post. So post is the verb, and we have /login, which is the endpoint, and then we can define what we want the body to be, the status to be. We can define all of those things, and even consume another real API. So it's as flexible as it gets, but it also adds complexity, and it doesn't have a UI, right? So comparing the two of these, Mokun has a UI. It's fast to test locally. We can just like that get going. We can alternate responses, and we can use logic without code. While Mock Service Worker provides more granularity, so if we want to get really, really specific, we can do so, and we can use it in unit tests, and it's right next to the code, right? So we can simulate an API call in our unit test, much the same like we use Mockito and other unit test applications. The difference is that we are simulating an actual API call, right? So that's useful for integration tests and that sort of thing. And also it's right next to the code, so we can have a version control over it. So we can use Git to keep track of it. We can execute it in a CI pipeline, right? So that's also awesome. So as Linus Torvalds would say, talk is cheap, show me the code. So what we're gonna do right now is view a few examples of this and just see how each of those works, right? So we're gonna head over to Mokun here, where I have an example project for the Global Summit. And something that we're gonna do real fast is that, hey, I wanna add an endpoint, so I can just go here, I can just select HTTP route, and I can put /hello here. And in the body, I'm gonna return down below, I'm gonna return greeting is hello. Right. So we have to restart the server when we add an endpoint. That's how we do it. And now we're gonna head over to Postman in this case. and I'm gonna say, hey, I want to go to localhost 3003/hello, and there we have it. So it's that easy. It's that easy. It's that simple. And we can just do all sort of things with this use case. So I've got a few examples over here of how crazy can we get with this. So let's keep it simple for now. I have an example on /users, which has the same user copy and paste 10 times over, right? So it's a list of users, and they have different IDs, but except for that, it's the same user, right? So if we go to get /users, we can press send, and we have the list of users, right? We can also have another endpoint, which is for deletion and all of the different verbs that we are allowed to in HTTP. Here we see that we are using param, which is ID, and I can return an ID with something that we're going to see in a second, but it's called templating. Mokun is actually integrated with handlebars, so it uses the handlebar syntax, and it also is integrated with Faker.js, which is also a popular library with fake data, so we can use it to do some real crazy stuff that we're going to see in a bit. So if we go over to delete users, I can press send, and here it returns, since I told it to delete the user 0, it returns ID 0 to confirm that it's deleted, right? And we can define it however we want. And right, so let's see something that let's see what else we can do. So here we can set a post and just tell it to give us a file when we hit the endpoint. So if we go over to post export/file, and I press send here, I get the image for the React Global Summit 2023. And yeah, I just had to set up a relative path here, right? So we can return files, but well, something else that we can do is that we can, and this is a new feature, by the way, we can define a CRUD route, which is a route for it's one route that we can define, and that lets us do all of the things in REST, right? So with just defining CRUD users, I get access to all of these different endpoints. And the big difference here is that it actually modifies our existing, we can use like a fake database to modify our users. So one thing that we can see in get users, if this is, I get the ID 0 here, and if I press delete on /users, it says that it's deleted, but it doesn't delete it here, right? So, because it's a mock. But if we have CRUD users, I can just go ahead and make a get here. In this case, we see that it's empty. I can make a post to users to create a user. Here I have an example body. I can press send, and when I press get again, I now get the actual body that I wanted to see, right? So and this is all with just one endpoint that we're defining, right? So that's very powerful. We can also set up a proxy here. A proxy is very useful in case you already have the actual API, because you can tell it, if you haven't defined an endpoint, it will automatically hit the actual API for the endpoint, and then you can add it to add the endpoint to your mocks. So that's very, very helpful. So let's see a few of the examples in templating. Templating is something that I've discovered a few weeks ago. Basically, here we can see that I use templating here to do exactly the same examples previously, but in this case, I'm using a sort of for each iteration. And right, so what we see here, if we switch the if we switch the flag here, we can go to Postman, and press the get/users. And in this case, we get exactly the same thing, but with only this amount of code, right? So previously we had all of these copy and pasted, and now we just have this. And we can do all sorts of crazy stuff with this. In this case, I have a more complex example which uses Faker.js, and it also uses query params and variables and all that sort of thing. You don't need to do any of this. I go through 6 months of work just doing the bare minimum, which is the simple example. But if you want to get crazy with it, you can. So here we set up the more complex example, and we see that we have the same repeat, which grabs a default of 10, but otherwise we can set up the actual size that we want it to be, and we can set the variable with a first name, a last name, and Faker.js will give us default data that looks real, but actually isn't, right? So now that I've switched the flag, I can just press send. And here I have totally different examples down below in the body. So Eileen, Christine, Alexandro, and I get usernames which make sense for the first name and the last name, right? So that's one of the useful things that we can do with Mockun. What else can we do? We can also we can also use a JSON file to get the data. So if we go over to get/animals, we can press send, and we're going to get animals that actually come from a file and not from the actual body of the application. And also we can, okay, so here I have another example of templating that I think we don't need to go over. And this templating that we see here, I can also put on a JSON file and use it from that file, right? So if I set it to have a complex template from the file, I can do exactly the same, and now I get like a different set of species and types of animals, right? So the first one is a dog from the species beacon, and now it's a snake, right? So this goes on and on. And that's basically it for Mockun. Now we're going to see a little bit of an example from Mock Service Worker, right? So right from the get-go, we see that we actually get this is our project, right? So this is an application. I'm going to start it right now. But basically, this is our front-end application that we're going to use. And we added in a few files over to the left in the folder called mocks that we're going to use, right? So let's take a look. So we can set up a worker in browser.js, which uses some handlers that we define. And if we go to the handlers file, we see that we have a list of endpoints, which is basically the same thing that we were doing, just without an interface, right? So I've gone ahead and defined an animals endpoint that we're going to use. And here we see that we have on /animals, we have a list of two animals, which are a rabbit and a bear. And in our index.js file, we ask if our environment is development, then we start the mocks server. And then on app.js, what we're doing is that we are fetching from /animals on a backend URL, and then we are setting the animals and displaying them over here, right? So if we go to this website, we can see that we are actually getting a list of the animals. The only difference is that if we go to network, we see that we're actually fetching the animals. So this is an actual GET request, but it says from service worker, right? And if we go to the console, it says that mocking is enabled, and it logs each and every mocked endpoint that we hit, right? So that's basically the difference between the two of them. we can use whatever fits our project best. I would recommend, if you have like a very specific project that needs like a custom logic for your mocks, I would probably go with Mock Service Worker. But if you're just starting out, I would recommend Mockun because it's simpler. It has a UI. You can eventually use it in a CI pipeline, and so yeah, that's basically it. And so, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, thanks for watching.
I was saying, great presentation. I've worked with MSW for like 3 to 4 years right now, and I think you did an amazing job setting it out as well. So we already have a couple of questions, and if anyone has any more questions for Dario, make sure to add them in your, as a comment in the live stream, and we'll have the opportunity to ask him. So starting with the first question that we have in here, can you mock a GraphQL API with Mockun? Have you tried working with this?
I haven't, but I think we can quickly look that up. Mockun GraphQL. And well, I have to look it up. I haven't tried actually. I haven't used GraphQL in an actual project, so yeah. But
okay,
yeah.
Yeah, on of hope, I can say that it works with MSW. At least that I know. I haven't tried Mockun as well, but you made me want to try it out. So that's a good thing. Let's check any other questions that we have in here. Can you generate documentation from Mockun and perhaps like try to pass it for your backend developers?
Right, so Mockun uses Open API format as something similar because we have the templating and so on. But if you're using just simple endpoints, you can actually like export it and then have your developers import it into Postman or Swagger or whatever they use. If you're using templating, there may be some transformation that you're going to have to use, right? So you're going to have to change it for actual endpoints.
Okay, so and for instance, for MSW, would this work as well?
I haven't tried. I think with Swagger, you can actually make documentation from hidden endpoints, but I have to check. Yeah, I actually haven't tried.
Okay, yeah, but this seems very exciting as well, because then all you need is, even if you don't have like a backend API, and I think you touched that very very well in your presentation, all you need is, okay, we have the schema, you have the API definition, let's go ahead and start working on our task, which is, personally, I think like that's a very tricky thing as a front-end developer nowadays, when you have to wait for that backend API that doesn't exist, and now you can just build stuff.
I would also encourage you guys to think the other way around. So thinking about the API first and documenting it, and then working on making the mock, right? So first, you actually, in order to make the mock, you have to know what we're going to build, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and then definitely. And then that's a huge win for you as a developer, because then you can tell your product owner or project manager, yeah, we can do this in pair with backend developers and we'll probably deliver this even faster, right?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, actually, in this last project that I've been working on over at Bootstrap, that's exactly what happened. So it was really fast-paced project, and it was built from scratch, and I needed to have an API to get things done, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to pressure other developers because that's something that's not really nice. And so I said, okay, someone must have invented something about this. I can't be the first person to stumble upon this. And I stumbled upon Mockun, which actually fixed this. And it actually mixes up the power dynamic, because you're actually negotiating the API with the backend team and thinking how it would be like. And then you can just work in parallel with them once you've agreed on what the API would be, right? So I don't need the backend guys to have it ready. I just need to hear from them that they agree with the API, and then I can just make the mock, and that's it, right?
Exactly. And then you probably get to scenarios where you're delivering the front-end task before the back-end one, and it's kind of like the reverse struggle, where now people are
Yes.
waiting for the backend instead of front end, right?
Yeah, that's something that also happens, right? Because in some cases, the front end is just displaying a list, but in the back end, there's like a lot of logic that's happening, and that's also happened to us, and it's been well, in the integration, nothing exploded. So that's and we were just waiting for something to explode, and it just didn't, and we are now in production, and it's very nice to see that working out, right?
Exactly, and even like you end up feeling a bit more safe as well, because then, for instance, I didn't understand if it works with Mokun, but with MSW I know it works. You can write tests already for integrating it. It doesn't use like that service worker. It's kind of an interceptor, but it ends up working as well. So you can just start testing ahead of time, and once the API comes, if you want to run those tests again, probably if it breaks, then it's because there was some or obviously you didn't contemplate something on your test, and there was something on the API that shouldn't be there.
Right. So with Mokun, I actually haven't done this, but it has a CLI that you can use in a pipeline. So
Okay.
you can use it to, if you're having GitHub Actions or something else, you can actually set that up so that you have integration tests with Mokun. Yeah, so that's also an option.
Okay, let's look into the next questions that we have here showing up. Oh, speaking of Mokun, an interesting one just showed up. Could you connect Mokun with Cypress to mock integration tests?
I'm sure. Yeah, I haven't used Cypress, so I have to check. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's a question of integration with one API to another one, basically.
Right. So Cypress is a little bit like okay. So Selenium, right? So you use it to automate. So if it works on the front end, Cypress, it doesn't actually need to. Cypress doesn't need to know what the backend is. If it's a mock, if it's an actual
Exactly.
server, you can use whatever you want. So I guess it's fine. I think
Yeah,
you can use
probably.
that.
Yeah, probably you just need to point to the URL that is being mocked right now, and hopefully it should work.
Right.
Okay, let's look at another thing here. So I think you mentioned Stoplight in your survey. What's the main difference between Stoplight and Mokun?
So I haven't used it personally, but I've had coworkers use it, and the difference that they've told me is that it was more restrictive in terms of the use cases, the different responses based on rules. So that's an area that I've been told is lacking in Stoplight. Right.
Okay, let's look at the next question. So this seems like to be a configuration issue. Did you ever experience a problem with configuring an mock service worker and were for an endpoint starting with /API instead of HTTP API? It seems like it happened when I used Vite bundler instead of Create React App. I'm not sure how to interpret this. If you like to give it a go, or we can try look at it together.
Yeah, no, I actually haven't stumbled upon that particular problem. Sorry. I haven't used Vite either.
Okay, but hopefully someone will find out an answer for this person. Let's look at the next question that we have here. So, as a best practice, who should write the mocks? Backend or front end developers?
That's an interesting one. So it actually, I actually haven't thought this through. What I actually have thought through is who should think about the API, who should define the API, and I think it's a team effort, right? So in a last instance, whoever writes the API should define it, but in reality, most of the time, maybe because of time schedules and so on, you need to be proactive. In the case of the project that I worked at, I was the one proposing APIs, and then I just say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And they would say, hey, this is how we can improve it. So it's like a team effort between the backenders and the front-end developers. In this particular case, I developed the mocks for our project, right, as a front-end developer.
So answering this question, I think it would probably depend on kind of who's more free to work on that.
Right.
Yeah, sharing a bit of my personal perspective here. The ways that I did it in the past in this scenario was pretty much, if we are the ones using the mocks in this scenario, the front end developers, then we implement them, because yeah, we did
Yeah,
the effort, but
I think it makes sense, but I think it also we also rely on the backend developers to tell us of all the use cases, or maybe if you have a product owner, they also
yeah, define.
yeah.
Okay, and one follow-up question here is: so does mocking tools in this scenario, Mokun and MSW, also imitate backend request timing? So could we perhaps manipulate delay times as in real life applications?
Yep. I haven't tried with Mock Service Worker, but with Mokun you actually can. If you want to show my screen
Yeah,
again
please
for
share your screen.
a second. Right, so if we go here to settings, here we have a miscellaneous, we have a latency, and we can actually set that up to however long we want. And we can also set that up on an endpoint basis. So here in Animals, here on the far right, we can define the latency of the request. So I'm going to put this on 300, and I'm going to put this on like a second, right? Let's say 2 seconds just in case. So if we go over to Postman, I'm going to go to get/users, and here I see on the time that it lasted 300 milliseconds.
Okay,
And if we go to get/animals, wait a
300.
second. Yeah. Maybe it's a problem
Yeah.
with priorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, but you show that it worked for one example, so that's a cool thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. I was, yeah, sorry. So what happened there is that I had the flag here,
Okay.
which, yeah, so I actually wasn't hitting the actual response that I wanted. So if we go to
You were
send,
forwarding it. Okay.
yeah. Okay, so now we have the 2 seconds, right? So we have an endpoint
Okay.
base and global latency.
Mm-hmm. I can say for mock service worker here, or you just to complement, you can use the context object and do context dot delay, and you can pass the new time in milliseconds here. So it should work very very similarly to this part. Let's look at next question that we have in here. Let's see, we've seen this one. Oh, this is something interesting. So, why would I use Mokun or mock service worker instead of just writing in my code simple return promise or mock and keep the backend call commented?
So, because as you go, I'm not sure how your development process is, but as it goes, as the company grows, it grows in complexity. So you have maybe you have Git flow where instead of just pushing straight to main, you have a new branch and you have a code review and you have all of these different things that make it so that when you want to try something, when you want to change something in the code base, it actually takes time. You need someone to review it. You need to merge it. So basically, if you have to just go ahead and change it every time you want to try something new, it basically doesn't scale at that point, right? So it also is less clean, right? So it's not really clean to do so. If you have all of your code commented, if you've had your code reviewed, you probably notice a lot of comments saying remove this comment, because people don't like them. So yeah.
Okay, I think we run out of questions, so I think we can wrap this up for now. So Dario, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really great presentation. You made me really want to check out Mokun as well, so I think I'll give it a go after today. Like I'm doing a list with the conference so far of everything I want to try out, and thanks to you, I just added something else to the list. If anyone has any other questions, you can reach Dario on your LinkedIn page, right? That's the link you added here.
Yeah, I'm also going to be staying for a few minutes to answer any questions on the chat
Okay.
if you want to ask them. And I also have the resources from this talk in a GitHub repo if you want me to share it. So you guys can download it, the presentation, the examples, all of it. You can just go to github.com/Dario Kosicki/rockandmock, and here you have all of the examples. And so yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dario. It was a pleasure to meet you, and looking forward to seeing your next presentations in the future, having you once again in the next conference. So have a nice day.
Thank you for having me, and yeah, have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.